Welcome to the Clayton Tyner podcast, where we reframe current issues through the lens of ancient wisdom. This week, we look at some dangerous new TikTok trends that are both promoting and possibly causing young people to slip further into depression. We go through the allegations made against LIZZO. She's accused of harassment, false imprisonment, creating a toxic work environment, and even fat shaming her backup dancers. The U.S. women's soccer team were defeated in an upset win when the infamous Megan Rapinoe missed an open shot on goal. Many Americans are celebrating over the loss, feeling justified in Rapinoe's untimely demise. Others are cautioning that we should not gloat over a loss by our own country. So how should we think about that? All that and one in-depth look at LeBron James' I Promise School in Akron, Ohio. While the media have put out a steady stream of content glowing up the innovative school, behind the scenes, the students are falling further and further behind academically. Is the school a massive failure? And can this be corrected? Let's find out together on episode 27 of the Clayton Tyner podcast. Episode 27. Man, I am so excited. I'm so thankful for everyone who has been just rocking with us from the beginning. Give yourselves a hand. You guys deserve it. Y'all are the ones building this channel and really making this happen. Last week, our And One segment was about the curriculum in Florida. And man, that clip got a lot of attention. I think it's the most comments I've ever gotten. Were any of the comments positive?
No!
I mean, like, were 95% of them just really negative? Yes, absolutely, they were. But it was really fun, got to have some good dialogue. What I have found is there are certainly a lot of people on YouTube who just are there to troll and to stoke up division and to try to make people angry. They have no idea how much joy it brings me that they're even commenting on our post. We're still a really small channel at this point. But I've also learned that there are a lot of people who are really wanting to dialogue, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Some people have wondered kind of how I pick the stories that we cover. We do 4 stories a week, and there's so much that we could get to. And some of the stories feel very obscure. Like last week, I talked about Miranda Lambert getting onto people taking selfies in the front row. That clip didn't particularly get a lot of attention, but I loved just what I learned out of that clip, because it really forced me to think about power dynamics in a room and what it means to lead from authority and what it means to lead from influence. And look, there are times where I'm going to talk about the top stories. Like every single week on the podcast, we could talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is allegedly like erasing, videotapes at Mar-a-Lago. And Joe Biden is allegedly really involved in Hunter Biden's business dealings, even though he has said over and over and over again that he has no contact at all with his business. So like that's going on all the time. It's not going anywhere. But unless I feel like I have something somewhat unique to say about it or a unique biblical perspective to bring to it, then, we're just not going to go over the exact same story every single week. And so again, we have some unique kind of stories to tell, some a little risque today that we'll try to get a good perspective on. I would appreciate you guys following me. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Clayton Tyner. That's Clayton, Tyner. And to like, to comment, get busy in those comments. That lets the YouTube algorithm know people are paying attention. And most importantly, subscribe on the YouTube channel. If you listen to the RSS feed and you want to do me a huge favor, go to youtube.com/Clayton Tyner. Again, that's Clayton, Tyner, and subscribe. This is really where my focus is right now on the YouTube channel. And if you want to know what my real job is, you can go to youtube.com/Meta Church. We just started a brand new series where we're looking at the vision for Meta Church for the next 5, 10, and 15 years. I think it'll be really exciting, and it'll give you a really deep insight into who we are and what we're about at Meta Church. So without further ado, let's get into our 3 points. A pair of new TikTok trends has psychologists worried about their harmful effect on the population. Bed rotting is a trend where you highlight staying in bed all day long, sometimes for days at a time. It's packaged as self-care, but pretty obviously this is not healthy for you. Depression rooms have also shown up as a trend. This is the reveal of how disgustingly dirty your room is due to some level of depression keeping you from cleaning it up. So why are these trends even a thing? And what do they show us about the human condition and the dangers of social media? We have a report from a local news station about this bed rotting trend. Let's check that out.
Trend deemed as bed rotting has raised some concerns from mental health experts. So bed rotting is when people decide to stay in bed all day doing immobile activities that include sleeping, watching TV, or being on the phone. Now, experts say it's okay to have a lazy day, but people should incorporate other activities too, like hanging out with friends and family. They warn that being inactive for a long time could be a more serious mental health concern, and people should talk to a doctor if it happens often.
Okay, so pretty obvious stuff. Like if you are in bed all day long and you can never get out of bed, you're depressed. Now, the problem with this is that social media is making this a trend, and humans, especially the status quo of human existence, which is someone who is not being intentional about the structure of their life, not being intentional about the goals that they have for their life and putting strategies in place to reach those goals. The status quo of society is just being swept along by the current of culture. And what makes this dangerous is there are people who are not depressed, but they're just incentive machines. And so whatever incentivizes them on social media, that would be incentivizing them to be a part of what's going on, to be on the inside, to get more likes, to get more followers, then whatever incentivizes them, they will do, which this is the real problem, is that someone who is not depressed will begin doing the behavior of depressed people and will end up depressed. And this is a very interesting psychological phenomena that a lot of times, there's the idea of fake it till you make it. And I don't like that expression per se. Like I don't actually like that expression. But there is some level of validity to the idea that you start behaving how you want things to be, and those things will begin to take shape in your life. They find this inside of relationships. And as a pastor, one of the things I do is I counsel with marriages who are struggling. And I always tell them, begin to do loving acts towards each other, especially when you don't feel like it. And the strangest thing will happen when you begin to do loving acts towards your spouse, or you begin to do platonic loving acts towards your friends or coworkers, you will actually begin to grow the emotion of love and affection for them. So the same thing is true in the reverse. When you begin taking the actions of a depressed person, don't be surprised when you end up depressed yourself. And the other side of this bed rotting is depression rooms. And these are people, some of them are meant to be inspirational, just to be fair. Like, man, I've been so depressed, but now I'm finally going to clean my room. And I'm going to show you on TikTok how just horrifyingly disgusting my room is. And I mean, I could only watch like one of these because this is like hoarders level, moldy, terrible, disintegrating food in bowls, dirty clothes everywhere, really just disgusting rooms. And look, people are saying, I've been so depressed, I can't clean my room. But typically, like for all of human history, people have struggled with, depression, depressive seasons. And, hopefully they have good people in their corner who help them out of that. Nowadays, we kind of delineate between normal depression that we all go through and clinical depression. And so there is medicine, and there's a big debate over SSRIs and how effective they are, if they're actually good for you. But it wasn't that you took the season of depression and then broadcast it, because again, now you are incentivizing people. Like, if I am depressed and I have this like some completely grody room and I'm willing to put it online, I might get thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of views. And so there's all of these things psychologically that social media does to us. One is just confirmation bias, and confirmation bias also happens psychologically, where we feel a little bit depressed, and so we start doing things that a depressed person would do, and pretty soon we are actually depressed. And confirmation bias also happens by the way we carefully curate our social media circles, the people who we are in conversation with and in community with. Most people on social media are not on there anymore to try and have spirited dialogue with people who have opposing opinions that could enlighten them and help them be a more well-rounded person. Most people are just looking for an echo chamber. And when you start talking about things like anxiety and depression and other neurological and psychological issues, when you put a psychological issue in an echo chamber, what you begin to do is feed that issue. And the more you feed it, the more it will grow. And a lot of times with things that are going wrong in our life, what we need to do is starve those things. And instead we end up feeding them in these echo chambers. And people just don't want to hear something else. In John, the 3rd chapter, it's talking about Jesus coming to the world. And it says, the light has come into the world, and people loved darkness rather than light, because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. Confirmation bias. If I were to come to the light, if I were to get an outside opinion, if I were to actually get help for what I'm dealing with, instead of just leveraging the issue I'm having in order to gain more credibility and more attention online, then my real situation would be exposed and I might actually have to change. And so that's really a dangerous place to put ourselves in. And remember, these aren't primarily well-rounded, fully functioned, full prefrontal cortex developed 25-plus-year-olds. These are primarily, young people doing this. The other thing we get is social validation. People come on and they look at your experience bed rotting and they say, you go girl. Oh man, look at you just spending literally all day completely sedentary, only eating ice cream, never leaving your bed, laying still, getting bed sores. Look at you. You did it. Good for you. And really, what you need is the positive side of a loving social pressure to let you know these are not healthy things. It shouldn't be. It really should be. Like somebody needs to walk into these young people's life and just tell them, no, like this is not what you do. This is not how you live your life. And this social validation comes primarily from just sitting and staring and seeing how many clicks and how many likes and how many comments and how many shares and how many followers. And just really what you're doing is you're staring at yourself. And I do realize the irony of this as I'm looking into a camera, shooting a podcast, hoping that it will be helpful to someone. The term narcissism, it comes from a Greek myth. It's the myth of Narcissus. And Narcissus was like the greatest warrior of his time. But one time when he was out on a hunt, he ended up at this still pool of water. And in that water, he could see his reflection. He became so enamored with his reflection that he actually ended up, I believe the myth ends with him dying because he literally couldn't pull himself away from staring at his own reflection. This is an ancient Greek allegory. And how just absolutely on the nose is that for what we're doing and what we're dealing with today? People staring at themselves and staring at their echo chambers and staring at their confirmation bias until it is literally killing them. The other problem with social media, and especially with these types of trends that are very psychologically and neurologically damaging, is that they can create social contagion. And this is how social media proliferates. This is how these trends spread across the world in a matter of hours sometimes, is that there is a contagious aspect to these things. And there is a bit of a contagious aspect sometimes, literature will show, among depression in tight-knit groups of young people especially. It can happen to older people as well, but you're consistently putting yourself around depressed and depressive people. And again, like I've already said, you are feeding the very thing that you should be starving. You're feeding yourself with more depressive people and depressive ideas and depressive actions. And of course, you end up becoming more depressed. Proverbs says, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. And There's just no coincidence that the majority of these trends are not healthy. Many of them, kids are getting hurt. They're getting physically hurt. They're putting themselves in legal trouble. They're putting themselves in neurological trouble. They're putting themselves in psychological trouble. They're hurting themselves socially. They're isolating themselves. Social media has just done far more negative things to our culture than it ever has provided positive things. And I always try to remember to say this for the parents who might be watching this. As a reminder, your kids don't own their phones. Even if they do own their phones, they own them inside your house, under your roof. They have no right to privacy on their phones. You need to know what they're watching. You need to know what they're taking in. Even if you think you might not know. You need to get some software on there that actually tracks what they're doing. You need to pay attention. You need to be looking at their phone consistently and digging through it. Their right to privacy does not trump your responsibility as their parent to make sure they are feeding their minds and their bodies and their souls things that are actually healthy for them. Singer LIZZO, as well as her company Big Girl Big Touring, are being sued by multiple performers from her most recent tour. LIZZO is known as a vocal advocate for body positivity, and she's being accused of many things, oddly enough, including fat shaming her backup dancers. The allegations really only get crazier from there. Let's take a look. This is an article from NBC News. And I'm going to get to use my censor button. So how about that? Just warning, if you're listening to this in the car, some of what she's being accused of is quite risque. If you've got, kids in the back or something like that, here's just a heads up for you. The article says 3 of LIZZO's former dancers have accused the singer of sexual harassment and creating a hostile work environment in a lawsuit filed Tuesday. They also allege that she pressured one of them to touch a nude performer at an Amsterdam club and subjected the group to an excruciating audition after leveling false accusations that they were drinking on the job. The dancers accused LIZZO, a performer known for embracing body positivity and celebrating her physique, of calling attention to one dancer's weight gain and later berating and then firing that dancer after she recorded a meeting because of a health condition. The suit, filed in Los Angeles Superior Court and provided to NBC News, also accuses the captain of LIZZO's dance team of proselytizing. Okay, I'm not going to go through all that. There's some other things in here. The stunning nature of how LIZZO and her management team treated their performers seems to go against everything LIZZO stands for publicly. While privately, she weight shames her dancers and demeans them in ways that are not only illegal, but absolutely demoralizing. The suit accuses LIZZO of calling attention to the dancer's weight after an appearance at South by Southwest Music Festival. The singer and choreographer later told the dancer that she seemed less committed to her role, a comment that the suit describes as a thinly veiled concern about Davis's weight. There are some crazier things in here, believe it or not. The trip to an Amsterdam gentlemen's club, or I guess gentlewoman's club, happened after a performance in the city. The suit states that LIZZO's after parties were routine and they were non-mandatory, but alleges that those who attended were favored by the singer and had greater job security. And that's going to be important to remember because part of what we're going to talk here about is power dynamic. And so they're saying, look, when we went to these strip clubs and sex shows, like crazy things that were apparently happening, they were non-mandatory. But if you went, then you got favorable treating, or you were treated favorably by LIZZO. At the club, LIZZO allegedly began inviting cast members to touch the nude performers. Just a lot of wild things that we're not going to specifically talk about. Very, very crazy things. Part of the suit is that they wanted one of the backup dancers to touch a nude performer and they were uncomfortable doing it. And so LIZZO started a chant like, whatever, do it. And everybody started chanting and then she felt pressured and then she did this. So many weird things happening here. And you kind of see the two sides breaking down. The one side is like, how could she? This is everything that she stands against. She's about positivity and especially body positivity. The other side has come to LIZZO's defense. Even some surprising people have come to LIZZO's defense saying This just seems like a shakedown. She didn't really fat shame anyone. She just told someone they seemed less committed. And then they read between the lines through their own inner narrative that that's a thinly veiled reference to their weight. And so what is going on here and what exactly is happening with Lizzo? I think Lizzo is very talented. She is a classically trained flautist. She can play the flute extremely well. She came out with a pretty unique sound, especially in her early music, compared to a lot of what was going on, which was just kind of all electronic music. You know, she has some actual musicality to what she's doing. She's a talented singer. She can rap. She's funny. She can do a lot of interesting things. Now, everyone knows, who knows Lizzo, that her big thing is that being big is beautiful. Now, beauty comes down to aesthetics. And if you've studied human history and you've studied any kind of sociology throughout time, then you will know that our standards for what beautiful actually is have changed dramatically throughout time. At one point, we thought, you know, the fairest skinned people were the most beautiful because it showed that they were wealthy and they stayed inside. We went to kind of another extreme where we thought the absolute tanner that you could be. Went through that season like in the early 2000s where everyone was orange, you know, because that was attractive. People have thought that really busty physiques were the way to go. At other times, it's been really, really thin physiques. There have been times where it's actually true that a woman who was bigger in weight was actually seen as more attractive. And interestingly, in some of my travels to impoverished countries, that's still the case because it is a sign of wealth in countries where people struggle to get nutrition. Someone who really has a lot of meat on their bones is seen as beautiful because the beauty gets tied into the socioeconomic status in some way. So, like, to say big is beautiful, man, I believe in a scripture that says we are all beautifully and wonderfully made. I'm on board. We're just talking aesthetics. Where I get uncomfortable is where they take the next step and say big is healthy and big is good. And by big, we're not talking about not in Thor shape. We're not talking about not a supermodel. We're talking about morbidly obese. And we kind of live in this culture now where if you say anything might not be healthy or might not be good for you or might cause serious issues in your actual physical health, then there's no in between, there's no nuance to be able to say you have full value and worth. You are completely loved by God. You are embraced by our society. You either have that or you have I hate you and I stand against you. Like that's it. Those are the extremes. There's no category for like I fully love you and you have full worth and value and I see you as a human being and I understand the struggle for many, many people who struggle with their weight. And it is always unkind to lie. And it is a lie to say that being morbidly obese is a healthy thing. So look, I have my own health problems. Mine has the opposite effect. I have an autoimmune disease that is specifically in my gastrointestinal tract, ulcerative colitis. And so I don't actually even know where my metabolism is at because it kind of doesn't matter because I have a stomach disease that makes it even, when I was young and really wanting to put on weight for athletic reasons, made it very, very difficult for me and causes my own issues of how I have to think about diet and exercise and those kinds of things. I don't know that struggle. I'm not going to pretend to know that struggle. I know that life is hard, that we create coping mechanisms very young. And for many people, their coping mechanisms are centered around diet and things like food. I know there's a lot of fear. I know there's a lot of health issues that make it very difficult to keep weight off. So are we in a world now where we have to lie to someone to be loving to them? Because that world is a paradox. That's a world that is untenable. We should be able to say, I completely love you and you're completely valuable and you have complete full worth and you are loved by God and you're loved by your people. And it is not good for you to be morbidly obese. It is the one comorbidity that leads to the most amount of potential suffering and health risk in your life. It is putting every one of your major organs under a level of stress it is not meant to carry. It is bad, really dangerous for your cardiovascular system. It will affect your endocrine system. This is not a positive thing. And body positivity has a root of something good in it, which is you should be able to love who you are on the inside. But it gets stretched to the extreme of we're going to call something healthy that is not healthy. The prophet Isaiah spoke about this. This is a verse that comes up increasingly more and more throughout the podcast because it's just so on the nose with where we're at in culture today. Isaiah said, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil." I am not saying being overweight is evil. Let's keep going. Who put darkness for light and light for darkness. Who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Who call unhealthy things healthy and healthy things unhealthy. It's just saying you're living in a very dangerous situation when you refuse to call things what they actually are. And so, of course, the potential hypocrisy, if what is alleged is true, which is that LIZZO was targeting people for their weight, when she is the person who not only says that being really overweight is beautiful, but it is also good and also healthy. And also, if you say anything to the contrary, then you're a bad person, right? So if that's true, now what seems to be alleged, still this is allegedly, but seems to be more in the realm of factual, like this actually happened, is that consistently LIZZO, who is not just a performer, but is the leader of this company, she is like the head of Big Girl Big Touring. This is a company that employs a lot of people. She is organizing trips out to not just typical strip clubs, but strip clubs with like real sex shows. The things described in here are quite perverted, quite promiscuous. And she would encourage. And what's also being alleged is there's this power dynamic where you didn't have to go. But if you were the one who didn't go, you were very subtly punished. You were no longer favored by LIZZO, who is a star, who is a celebrity, who has power, who has influence. And so LIZZO is positivity. She is all of these things. She's do your own thing. Be who you want to be. But if you don't come and engage in the perversion that I'm engaging in, then you're not one of my people. Matthew 7, this is speaking spiritually, but it certainly applies, says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Thus, you will recognize them by their fruits." If you want to know what someone is actually about, then watch the way that they behave. And here's what I think is the most damning of all of the allegations is obviously some people were uncomfortable with going to these sex shows and seeing these really wild, eccentric things. And they also allege that she then tricked them into coming out to one of these sex shows, that she just said, "We're going out to a performance." And then when they all got there, they were actually at something much different. And it just took away anyone's autonomy, even if they wanted to sit this out. It's like, "Hey, we're going to go, come watch the magic show." And you get there and it is, not magic at all. So what does all of this come down to? How do we think about this as Christians? Well, there is a principle in scripture called being above reproach. And this is a good idea for all people in all times, especially followers of Jesus. Living above reproach means you live in a way where no one can make a meaningful accusation against you. Like you can bring the receipts. You have accountability in your life. You have a level of stature and moral character that people aren't going to begin to question this. This is the problem with calling something that is obviously unhealthy, healthy. This is the problem with promoting to millions and millions of people that LIZZO has under her sphere of influence, that it is okay and good and healthy to be morbidly obese. I mean, I don't want to overstate the case here, but she is leading millions of people to potentially dangerous or even deadly outcomes with that kind of logic. That's the level of that lie. And so when someone is willing to call bitter sweet and sweet bitter, they're not above reproach. They're not seeing the world clearly. They're not living in a logical and reasonable fashion. And often logic and reason are set over here on the side of science and kind of separated away from the whole faith crowd, the whole Jesus crowd. That shouldn't be the case. If we really believe that Jesus is who he says he is, and that he is God in human flesh, and the God he represents is the God of all creation, then God created a world that is intelligible and understandable, which means that logic and reason are actually sourced in our transcendent God. Furthermore, without a transcendent grounding, you really can't have logic or reason, which is a different apologetics conversation we're not going to get fully into right now. Living above reproach is the way to live where you can lead at your highest level, where you can have relationships at your highest level, where you can feel a fulfilling life at the highest level. And the question is, whose responsibility is it to be above reproach? Is it LIZZO as the leader, the one with all the influence, the one with all the power? Is it her backup dancers? Are they the ones who should be above reproach? They're the ones at the bottom of the power dynamic. Am I getting ready to blame the victims?
Wow.
There's a story in scripture about Joseph, and Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery. He was at the lowest power position you could possibly be at. He was a hard worker. So he was put in the house of Potiphar, who was a powerful leader in Egypt. And one day, Joseph, who was a striking young man, he was cleaning their house when Potiphar's wife came and tried to seduce him. She actually grabbed him quite forcefully. And I mean, dude, if you're looking at this from a secular perspective, from a do whatever you want, live your own truth perspective, why not? You know, like these fools have put you in slavery. I mean, get back at them. You know, there's a beautiful, wealthy woman who wants you. Why not? Well, why not is because it goes against God's law. And Joseph is someone who lived above reproach. Not only did he rebuff her coming onto him, but she held onto his jacket. He just slipped out of it and ran. And if you know the story, it actually cost him in the short term. It really cost him. Like he spent years in prison because she had his coat and made a false accusation against him. And so, look, you got to be careful, because if it sounds at all like you're blaming the victims, you go to cultural jail and you get canceled. But if you're a Christian and you're at the bottom of a power dynamic and someone is asking you to come and do something that is immoral or indecent, you don't do that thing, even if it will cost you. And I'm not saying that's easy. It's actually very, very difficult, especially in a work environment, and especially with a celebrity. Celebrities have like a gravitational pull. And you've probably wanted to be on the big girl, big touring team for years and years, and you're finally there. But if the answer is you got to come to a sex show and watch degenerate acts and be a part of it and do things that are completely outside of your moral compass, then you have to say no. You have to be a Joseph. You have to step up and you have to do the right thing. Even if it costs you, maybe even especially if it will cost you, it's all of our decisions to live above reproach. You know, the way people are reporting on this is that the evening became completely uncalled for, or the evening all of a sudden became completely inappropriate when all of a sudden the sex act started doing this very specific thing with their bodies. It's like, no, the night became inappropriate when everyone walked out of the hotel and went to a strip club. That's when it became inappropriate. Your bosses should not be taking you to those things in the first place. And if you are a believer, you shouldn't be going to those things, even when there's pressure to do so. And we should look for leaders who are above reproach. And we shouldn't be surprised when we can see the fruits of people's tree. And we can see that someone is calling something very unhealthy, healthy. That there are probably other areas of their life where they are falling into that exact same trap. Megan Rapinoe, don't know how to say it, has courted controversy for years, from continuing to kneel during national anthems to her outspoken stances about equal pay, her refusal to go to the White House, and, right or wrong, being viewed as unpatriotic at best and anti-American at worst. Rapinoe missed an open penalty shot during a shootout to determine the winner of the first round match versus Sweden in the World Cup. Many are celebrating her downfall, while others have expressed sympathy. So is this karma, getting what she deserves? Would a truly patriotic person ever cheer that a U.S. team lost? So how should we think about this viral sports moment? I have the moment of her missed goal pulled up for us to watch here. Look, I don't know a lot about soccer, but I do know as a professional, you want to make this shot. A little slow motion. Just absolutely shanks it. Now, I have heard some hot takes on this, like, 47-year-old men who are like, look, I've never played soccer a day in my life. I would have made that goal. I have news for you. No, you would not have. Maybe I'm uniquely bad at soccer. I mean, I'm very, very open to that possibility. I only played in 8th grade. I got at least a yellow card every single match, which, if you don't know soccer, is not a good thing. I got handball all the time because if the ball was coming at my face, I was going to grab it with my hands. I was horrible. I was fast and I could actually dribble it, okay. And so I would go all the way down the field and I would get 6 feet away from the goal and I would kick it into the parking lot every single time. Even now, my oldest son, Lane, he does like soccer and he's pretty good at it. He didn't play in high school or anything, but he plays with his friends all the time. He's pretty talented. And we will go down to the high school and we'll bring a soccer ball. And I'm telling you, from 11 feet away, I do exactly what Megan Rapinoe did. Every time, somehow I shank it and kick it all the way over. It is so frustrating to me. Now, should she have kicked it like a field goal all the way over as a professional, as the captain of the U.S. women's team? Of course not. It's a bad look. And this is supposedly her last game of soccer that she's ever going to play. She's retiring after this. And so that is officially how she goes out. Now, if you don't know, Megan is very, very outspoken on so many different things. She's very outspoken on all kinds of different rights and things that she sees as wrong. She's made a lot of statements just about how, America really isn't living up to its promises and women can't get ahead and minorities can't get ahead. And she's kind of thumbed her nose at the idea of America throughout her career. Now, I always want to be as fair as possible. I also saw an article recently where someone very clearly said, "Are you unpatriotic?" And she said, "No. I just think that there are some things that need to be fixed and I'm fighting to change those things." I think a lot of people's problem is that she does tend to come off as very smug and very elitist. And suffice it to say, however the chips have fallen, a lot of people do not like Megan Rapinoe or however you say it. This is how little I know about soccer. I don't, she's the most famous woman in soccer. I don't know how to say her name. So they lost and they have won the World Cup. I think the last 2 times in a row. I think this would have been a three-peat for them. They were the odds-on favorite. Sweden was really the underdog and Sweden came in and beat them in the very first round. That's my understanding of what happened here. It was a huge upset. And so something very interesting happened because the people who by default don't like Megan Rapinoe and therefore U.S. women's soccer, because Megan represents them, I guess, are people who are at least a little bit patriotic, because the reason that they don't like her is because she's seen as not patriotic. And so we have kind of a catch-22 where the patriotic people don't like the captain of the U.S. women's soccer team that represents the United States, that the patriotic people are patriotic about. And so if our team, USA, if they win, then Megan wins. And no one likes Megan because she represents America, but she hates America. That's at least the narrative. And so you had this very interesting moment where U.S. women's soccer lost, and you would think a patriotic person, it doesn't matter the team. I mean, look, when the Summer Olympics come around, all the patriotic people become, I mean, like racquetball, enthusiasts, Winter Olympics, they become, what's it called? Where you just throw the brick down the, you just throw a big rock and you just have brooms, in the comments, tell me what it is. I mean, it's like we're experts in that because you know why? America. That's why. And so then we have this very interesting thing where the most patriotic people in the country are celebrating one of our national teams losing. And it really does show you how like one rotten apple can spoil the whole bunch for people. And I do see both sides of this. I have an opinion. I'm really curious what you think in the comments of whether people who are patriotic should celebrate the loss of one of their nation's teams, regardless of who is on it, or whether they should just celebrate because we're patriotic and that's US. And if the US loses, we shouldn't celebrate. We should be sad about that. Here's what I think about patriotism. I think a lot of people confuse patriotism for people who love every single aspect of their country. And that's certainly not true. Patriotism is about gratitude for your country despite its many flaws. I have never been accused of being the world's most patriotic person. What has happened to me is the more I've studied human history and the more I've studied American history, the more I have come to see the American experiment as something that borders on the miraculous. And the other thing that I see is in our founding, which we had a lot of things wrong, some very obvious things like slavery. But then as the American experiment began to prove itself out and begin to live up to the tenets that we set forth in our Declaration, what I begin to see is the unmistakable Christian influence on the ideals that undergirded the country. And so the more I've learned, the more I have come to appreciate it and to have a lot of gratitude for our country. And I think that's patriotism. You can read about the founders and the early leaders of America, and they would not hesitate to talk about the flaws of America and the flaws and things that were going wrong and the things we needed to get right and the things we needed to improve on. And yet they still had a deep gratitude for their country. There's a few reasons I think that people are kind of dancing on Megan Rapinoe's grave here. In Proverbs, it says very clearly, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom. And again, I think her statements and her quotes and her kneeling and all of these things, all of that really upset a lot of people. I think way more than that, it was the sense of pride and the sense of entitlement that she has carried that really made her an enemy. In Matthew, Jesus said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And I think that's kind of the situation, at least from perception, which perception is often reality for people, that you have the captain of the American team who doesn't particularly like America. It feels like a house divided. And so the question really is, how should we respond? Now, if you are a believer, there's a very clear way to respond, even if you don't particularly like Megan Rapinoe's stances or you don't like how she carries herself. Jesus said, but to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Jesus was saying this in a very politically charged environment where Rome had come in and occupied Israel. And a lot of his instructions, when Jesus says, if someone asks you to walk a mile, walk two, that had very specific political connotation because there was a law in Roman territories where if a Roman soldier or centurion, they could pull anybody that they had in their provinces aside, take off all of their gear, make you carry it, and you had to carry it a mile for them. Whatever you were doing, you were working, you were drawing water from the well, you were playing with your kids, they could grab you, and by law, you had to walk their stuff a mile. And Jesus says, hey, they want you to walk 1 mile, walk 2 miles. That's the kind of love and forgiveness that is expected of us. There's an ancient allegory. I believe it is a Greek allegory. I could be wrong about that, but it's the story of the broken pot. And it's a very simple story. There was a man who had two pots. One of them had a significant crack in it, and the other one was perfect and pristine. And the broken pot was just, used and all messed up. And every day he would fill that pot with water. That's what he would take to the well, and he would get water and he'd bring water back for his home and for his family. And of course, a lot of water would leak out. And in this kind of parable, the pots are personified. And the broken pot was always very insecure because it saw this absolutely perfect pot and it just couldn't live up to that ideal. And so one day it finally asked the owner, like, why do you use me? You have a perfect pot right there, and I'm cracked, I'm old, I have flaws. Why do you use me? And the owner said, pay attention on our walk back from the well. And on the walk back from the well, the owner pointed out all the flowers that grew along the path to the house because the broken pot would leak water and water the flowers on the way. And we're never going to have a perfect nation. Patriotism is having gratitude for your country despite its flaws. And I think really, if you're patriotic, and let me know what you think about this. I think if you really want to teach Megan Rapinoe a lesson, then mourn the loss of Team USA despite her rhetoric about the country. Here's my guess. My guess is that the reaction of gloating over the loss of Team USA, and almost like a storybook ending for anyone who did not like Mrs. Rapinoe, she had the chance. She shanked the shot, wide open penalty shot. She didn't make it. Everyone gloating over that, I would guess you're giving her exactly what she wants. I think you're actually making her point for her, that you're not actually patriotic. You don't actually like the country. You actually are a misogynist. You actually are all of these things. I think that you can still stand for your principles and not let someone get your goat so much. And you can practice this diligence and this forgiveness and this true patriotism, which isn't pretending like everything in your country is perfect. It's having deep gratitude for your country despite its flaws and fighting to mitigate those flaws and to continue building the best culture that you can. All right, now let's get to our last section. LeBron James opened a brand new school a few years ago. It's called the I Promise School in Akron, Ohio. They set out to build something that was completely unique, completely innovative, that was a holistic approach to education. All kinds of media, major news networks, newspapers, documentaries have come in, blown this up, just like really shown how incredible this is. And then it comes out that they have serious academic troubles. Let's look at a news report on this very issue.
It's back to school today for students at Akron's I Promise School.
Yeah, but they're starting the school year off under scrutiny over student performance. Our Kiara Cotton is live at Akron with the story getting national headlines this morning. And Kiara, this was surprising.
Yeah, good morning, guys. The school gets national attention because it's supported by LeBron James. And to be transparent, WKYC Studios does have a partnership with his foundation that provides resources and opportunities to the students here at the I Promise School. Now, that criticism comes after state test scores showed that none of the now rising 8th graders scored proficient in math.
Looking at the current 7th graders, and so for 3 years, not one child passed the state test in math, not one for 3 years.
It is discouraging.
It is discouraging indeed. This is like devastating. The 8th graders, none of them have passed the state math exam since 3rd grade. In 5 years, they have not passed a state math exam. And the story was broken by the Akron Beacon, which is a local paper there. Here's a few quotes from that. It says, this false class of 8th graders at the I Promise School hasn't had a single student pass the state's math test since the group was in the 3rd grade. It goes on to say, when the school's first class of 8th graders graduated, just 11% of them tested proficient on the state English language arts test. That's 89% who are not proficient in language arts. Last year, sixth graders lost ground. When they were in fifth grade, 7% were proficient on the reading test. And in sixth grade, just 2% were. These are really, really discouraging numbers. You heard one of the school board members say that very thing. This is just so discouraging. And, you know, I, basketball wise, have not been the biggest LeBron James fan. He has certainly grown on me, especially his longevity on the court really is significant. But when he opened this school, man, I just internally to my friends, to my family, I gave him a lot of kudos. And this may not be the most popular opinion, but I still give him kudos because there are millionaires, multimillionaires. LeBron will be a billionaire someday if he isn't already. There are famous, rich athletes all of the time, and they aren't setting out to do anything like this. LeBron is from Akron. He grew up in a single mother home. He grew up impoverished for most of his life. And I believe he truly wants to make a difference here. I don't think this is some kind of scheme, a publicity stunt. He's put a ton of money into this. They had really cool programs, good ideas, like every kid got a bike and a helmet, because a lot of times impoverished communities, single mother homes, part of the problem is just attendance. And actually, one of the news reports goes on to say they have like an 89% attendance rate. So that's working. Kids at least have a bike. They can get themselves to school. There are things that are working. There are kids who are hitting their targets. However, you cannot minimize the significance of what is being reported here. I mean, these are really, really bad statistics. And these are real kids. They're real lives who are getting out of 8th grade and have never passed a math test or are, you know, at a reading level that is grades and grades and grades below. This is going to set these kids up to significantly struggle through high school and significantly struggle in the real world. So part of my issue is the way that this has been reported on throughout time. Here's one example of one of these just absolutely glowing media pieces about the I Promise School.
5 years ago, NBA superstar LeBron James opened the I Promise School in his hometown of Akron, Ohio. The goal, to give at-risk youth a place to learn and feel supported.
I understand the mental state that goes in with these kids and where they come from.
About 1,600 students have attended the school, which demands that its students promise to always do their best and make healthy choices.
It's up to us as the mentors and everybody in place to help them to get to that point. That's what kids want to know, that you care about me, and we do here.
Proof of that, every graduate receives a college scholarship.
I never thought that I could have a chance to go to college. It goes back to breaking those cycles, those generational curses. We're really doing something different here.
This year, LeBron's foundation opened a community center offering job training. The foundation also runs a food bank and provides medical services.
Man, LeBron James, he's a role model, and he empowers us, and he shows us every day that if you work hard, you can live out your dreams.
Okay, so, I mean, over the last 5 years, you could just throw a digital rock and hit some kind of really beautiful, inspiring piece about the I Promise School. And why not? We should be highlighting celebrities and athletes and wealthy people who are seeking to do positive things with their money and with their influence. At the same time, that video we just watched was put out a month ago, almost concurrently with the Akron Beacon article about how none of these kids are anywhere near standard. And so part of my question is, how did countless journalists have their eyes on this school and come away with their media pieces and none of them address the actual academic issues? I mean, the bottom line is it is the I Promise School. So yes, man, I love that they have a food bank. I love that they're doing job training. I love everything about it. But if you're a school, your number one job is to grow kids academically. Now, there are a lot of people who are reporting on this and saying, you know, whatever they want to say about it, that LeBron isn't addressing the correct issues. He's not talking holistically about families and the importance of two-family homes and giving marriage resources so families can stay together, which is directly correlated with academic success. They're focusing too much on equity. They're doing all of these different things. And it's LeBron, and what does he know about education? He's made himself the vice principal possible? How arrogant is that? And so I've heard a lot of takes like that. And, there's probably some level of merit to some of those takes. But I have a little bit of a unique life experience that gives me a little bit of a different perspective. There is a statistic that the vast majority of the kids who go into the I Promise school are going in at least a grade level behind when they get there. It is very difficult to get kids caught up, especially depending on their circumstances and the other issues that they might be dealing with. When we adopted our daughter, she was 5, and intellectually, she was probably 1 year old. And I can't tell you the extents that we have gone to get her caught back up to grade level. She's now going into 5th grade, and she has made tremendous progress. She's an incredible kid, and she has grown. I mean, she's grown. It's like immeasurable how much she has grown, but she's not at grade level. And I mean, we have spent huge sums of money on cognitive brain training. I mean, we've done it all. We've had her in the best school we could get her in. She's had incredible teachers. She's had counseling. She's had all of these things. And it has been a slow grind to try to get her just back up to grade level. And for people who haven't experienced that, you just think, well, they were a grade level behind, so just set some really hard standards and just, it is possible. It is actually possible to get these kids caught up. And here's my issue. There's an ancient fable about the emperor's new clothes. And a lot of people misunderstand or misremember this, because the way I think a lot of people remember it is the emperor is walking around and he's butt naked, and everyone's pretending like he's not. That's how we often remember this story. But that's not what happened. The emperor's new clothes, everyone is fawning over the naked emperor and telling him, like, I love your new outfit. Dude, is that Armani? That is my favorite belt. It's like, bro, that's not a belt. He's naked, right? It's not just that they're pretending what's happening isn't happening. It's that they're staring directly at the problem and pretending it's not there. That's my issue with the way the media has handled the I Promise school. I am fine with them glowing up everything he's doing holistically, the growth, the family development, the resourcing, everything like that. But the point of an outfit is to have clothes on. And to say I love your outfit when you're naked is nonsense. And the point of a school is education. And for all of the standards to be below, and one of the most concerning pieces of data is that compared to other schools in the area that also have kids who are below grade level, the I Promise school is faring considerably worse. And so there is something systemically in the education process at the I Promise school that is not working. And look, it's not from a lack of good intentions. I love LeBron's intentions here. It is from a lack of accountability. And, LeBron's not an emperor, but he does call himself King James. And I think that his level of celebrity, and to put a positive spin on it, seeing a very wealthy celebrity do something this charitable and this honorable and with this much good intention, it has blinded people to even asking, is the school working? Are the kids learning? Are they going to be able to graduate? Will they be able to get through high school? Or will they have to drop out because they're so far behind? We're not asking the right questions. You cannot have true success without true accountability. Jesus tells a parable in Matthew chapter 25 about a king who goes on a journey, and before he leaves, he gives talents, which is a measure of money, a large sum of money, to his servants. And he expects them to invest it wisely. Now, if the king never returned, it wouldn't matter what they did with their talents, because the king's return is the accountability. And so one is given 1 talent, and 1 2, and 1 5. And the one who got 5 and the one who got 2, they went into the marketplace and they doubled their king's investment. And the one who only got 1 talent dug a hole and sat on it. He did nothing with it. And eventually the king returned and everyone had to give an account. They were held accountable. And the ones who did well were rewarded, and the one who did not was punished. And it's very instructive. You cannot have true success without true accountability. Accountability is the ability to give an account for what you have done. In the educational space, it is the ability to give an account for the growth and development of the young people that have been entrusted to your school. Without accountability, you will never know when you win. You can't know because there's no score on the board. The score on the board keeps you accountable to how you're doing in the game. And not only have we obfuscated and hidden the actual test scores of the kids in the I Promise school, we have papered over it with glowing media articles and documentaries, all about the positive things that are happening. And so, look, I do know uniquely how difficult it is when kids are behind grade level to get them caught up. I do also know that it's possible, but not without accountability. And here's my hope. Is the I Promise school a complete failure? I don't think it is. I think a lot of kids have had negative experiences there, and we need to hope and we need to pray for those kids, that they will have opportunities to get caught up, and people and mentors, people in their corner, and that the I Promise school will follow up with them and help them to get the resources that they need. I think that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and the best thing that could have ever possibly happened to the I Promise school is for people to begin to shine a light on it, because LeBron doesn't like to lose. He doesn't like to lose. And the score is up on the board now. And I think they now have the incentive. That's what accountability does in part, is it brings the incentive necessary to begin to see real, actual change. And I hope the change will happen. And I hope the I Promise school will be something that can be a model to be emulated. But if it's going to be a school, if it's going to be the I Promise Community Center, man, I think they've got an A+ right now. That's what it sounds like. But if it's going to be a school, the school has to educate the children. And so a light has been shown, the score is on the board. And I think that LeBron and his team at the I Promise school will respond appropriately. This has been episode 27 of the Clayton Tyner podcast. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Man, thank you for liking and subscribing. Make sure you subscribe. We are this close to 500 subscribers. When we get 500, I will be like, wow. And you will be like, wow. And together we'll all be like, wow. I am very excited. I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about the growth of this. I'm hoping here in the next couple of months to start adding something I want to call one-on-one, right? To stick with our basketball team, 3 points and one-on-one, to do longer form interviews with unique and interesting people. I have a few of those that I've started setting up in the background. Hopefully they'll come in the next couple of months. We'll continue to do the podcast like we've been doing it, 3 points and one, current issues, ancient wisdom. I hope this is helpful for you. I appreciate you so much sharing this, telling other people about it, and helping us get the word out there. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week on episode 28.